Hey, this is Karen, Coach's Corner Chats, and on the episode today, I'm excited to talk with Paul Kelshaw. Paul, give us a little background on where you're at and what you're up to.
Well, first, Kieran, thank you for inviting me onto your podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. So, my journey back, I started playing soccer around the age of 10. I probably was a little bit later than some of my friends. So I got involved. Basically, the team was desperate for a goalkeeper, and being one of the biggest kids around, the biggest kid always goes in goal. So from there, I just seemed to enjoy the position, and was really, everyone was telling me that I did well. I maybe think later on in life they told me I was doing so well, so I'd stay in there. But so gradually there, and from then on, with my brother and my dad, we became fans of Burnley, that are now in the Premier League. Mm-hmm. So we got season tickets, and then gradually we would travel around the country. We had that beauty of being able to go to away games. So I got to see a lot of England, really, basically just on Saturday afternoons. But I got to see lots of different places. And so then I really had a kind of a good eye for wanting to watch the game. Really, as that goalkeeper as well, you're seeing the field, and then having, that privileged opportunity to watch professional soccer, and then actually to see a team progress. So I've seen the same team from 4th division level, what they now call League Two, and progress all the way to the Premier League. So it's always, I've always had that love as well for the lower leagues of soccer, and building up, and that soccer isn't just always La Liga or the Premier League. So from there, from my university days, once I was getting ready to graduate, I was looking at a job opportunity. I'd considered doing Manchester United soccer schools. They had done a presentation at the college, and to me that seemed exciting. But then there was nothing in the Manchester area, or where I live. I was born about 20 miles north of Manchester. There was nothing in the Manchester area. Everything was further afield, and it just didn't seem the right fit for me. I had a couple of friends that had come to the States during the summer to work summer camps, and they just told me, it was a great time. So it's something that I got involved with. I had seen a job in England, what were they called, a football development officer. It was like it was working for the council, so the equivalent of working for the town. They wanted 2 years experience. And although I could have, put that I had that 2 years experience on my resume, I wanted to actually physically get those 2 years. I thought, perfect, I could go to the States, get that 2 years coaching in the nice weather, and then I'd be prepared for this entry-level job that I was looking at. And well, that never materialized. It just kept. I started off coaching for a company called MLS Camps, and got to travel all around the country. Then I worked for a company called Noga, based in the tri-state area, mainly Long Island and Southern Connecticut. And since then, I left there in 2013, and I've worked as director of coaching for Hewlett Lawrence for, I'm entering my 8th year. So that's also been the 8th year that I've worked for myself, which is also an interesting thing.
So I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning. So soccer is like craziness over in England, but you didn't get locked in until you were 10. What was it just not something that caught your eye, or was it because I'm a big tall dude, so I'm not really suited for this game?
I just didn't really, well, in the area, so once you're around 7 or 8, in England, there'd be one team. It wouldn't be like C and D teams. If you weren't good enough, then you just played in the streets. So there was just one team. I might I was an older, I had a younger brother, and it's funny, it was actually my younger brother that probably got me more involved in soccer. I would prefer just to ride my bike, or or go build a den in the field. And I'd go home when people would play soccer, and they would play at, they call it playtime, but recess at school. I wouldn't play. And then I realized I was getting left out. I was, so I realized to be included, I wanted to get involved. And my first involvement, I got asked to play in a five-a-side tournament. So five-a-side in England was very big. You played with it was like a big tennis ball, and you played off the boards, and the ball couldn't go overhead height. The goals are probably about 3 feet high, but maybe 7 feet wide. And it was always a fun game, and we played in a tournament, and we had done pretty well. And so that's how I got involved in it. And then, because when I first started as well, there was no roll on, roll off subs. So your team would have 3 subs. And once, obviously, like professional soccer, once you were out of the game, you couldn't go back in. So when I first started playing, it'd get like 5 minutes at the end, and they would maybe just put you somewhere like they'd put you like in the middle of the field, just where you couldn't really do any harm. They weren't gonna. So obviously, that as that 10-year-old, that gets pretty. It's kind of heartbreaking. You'd only get a few minutes here and there, or once the game was over. So I then saw being the goalkeeper as the chance to really like get a starting place in the team, and that's what I was able to do. So it wasn't always. And then once we got into school soccer in England, you go to primary school, so elementary school up to 6th grade, year 6, and then you start high school, secondary school at year 7, which is like the 7th grade, and you go through to 11th. So, and they would have a soccer team at that year 7, that 7th grade level, and you went to like the tryouts and wasn't too successful, but then I got put on the B team and then did really well, and then got promoted to the A team. Huh. The first year was never that good. So I'd had a few setbacks at the early stage, but from then on, so from that year 8, 8th grade level, so you're probably about 12 now. Yeah, you're probably around 12 years old. Then unfortunately, that's probably when I peaked as a soccer player. So around that, so from that 12 to 16 age range, I felt like I was, I played every game for the school from that time, and then I progressed from the local club's B team. I transferred over, and I was on the B team. On the A team with my friends. So those boys that I'd initially didn't think I was good enough to play with, or was no chance of even getting a look in on that team, I was now on that team. So that was, I have fond memories of playing for the team, Rosendale Valley, their name was. So, being able to play with those childhood friends, that was obviously a big thing. But yeah, you're right. Soccer is everywhere. And where I'm from, even though you're surrounded by Manchester and Liverpool, and even at the time, Blackburn had just won the Premier League, everyone was a Burnley fan. You may have had a soft spot for a Liverpool or a Manchester United, but everyone was Burnley. And that was something that you don't necessarily get growing up here on Long Island. But so that's when I really fell in love with watching Burnley. My idols growing up were Burnley goalkeepers. Obviously still had a soft spot for Peter Schmeichel at Manchester United. maybe even like a David Seaman at Arsenal in England. But the big thing was being a Burnley fan and trying to, like, probably to my detriment, mirroring my game on being a Burnley player.
So on those game days, was it kind of like that whole town kind of shut down because it was like Burnley's on TV, so we're all going to be watching it, or we're going to the match?
Well, back in the day, they wouldn't, because they were lower league, they wouldn't really be on TV.
Oh,
So if you wanted to see them play, you had to go to the game. And at this time, if they were getting around 10,000 fans and the stadium held around 21,000, so it was pretty easy to get a ticket. And one of the beauties as well in England, they have reduced rates for children. So a child season ticket was less than what it cost to go watch one Premier League game now.
Wow.
So that was a great way to be able to get involved. I was also privileged as well that my dad traveled for work around the country. So eventually, once we got older, we started going to a lot of away games. So being able to see a lot of the English soccer stadiums and getting to follow the team, not necessarily every week, but it was still, they would only be on TV if they were playing in a cup competition. Mm-hmm. Very rarely. It's only now with basically every game televised that you could watch it as an armchair fan.
What do you see different from the Burnley that you started out kind of falling in love with at that like level 4 versus where they're at now at the Premier? Is the stadium bigger? Have they just now it's just full, or what are some of the things that you've noticed?
When I first went, it was the two sides were seated and they were wooden seats. You definitely felt like you'd gone in a time warp into the early 70s. And then the other two sides, one end behind the goal was open terrace with standing. And then their most famous, they call them a stand, their famous stand, the long side was covered, but it was all standing. They knocked that down around 95, 96, and they did build, two modern stands, but it's not like a bowl there. So it has changed because there's so many requirements to be on TV in the Premier League that, like, the floodlights have to be, I don't know, for HD quality or everything, or there has to be enough space for media. They've started to fill in the corners so there's more access for disabled fans or handicapped fans, should I say. So there's better wheelchair access, better viewing points. So things are better press boxes. So things like that have changed, but it is, and now the stand that I grew up watching the team in is now where the away fans sit. So there has been some changes, but nothing really in the stadium, in the ground, has changed since like the mid 90s. So it's a very like historic ground. They play on the same site that they played on when they were first founded back in the 1800s. So it's or 18, if I'm getting right, 1882. So it's and then all the way around it is like most stadiums in England. The only thing I've ever been close to is Yankee Stadium, where you're in a neighborhood where there's houses all around. It's not so you definitely feel like you're in a time warp, and because it's surrounded by hills as well. I grew up in a valley, so all the way around you there aren't a lot of trees, so you can see sometimes when they show the games on TV, they'll show you the hills and you can see all around. So it is it's definitely like a historic place, and there'd be uproar if they were to move to a modern stadium, or if they were to move to, say, the outskirts of town, like some clubs have done, to move to a big facility, that stuff like that doesn't go down too well in England.
I was going to say that the cool thing is just the ability for you and your family, and then like that whole community, to have fallen in love back. I mean, the club's 100 and plus years old, and for it to stay where it's at and be a consistent like part of the community is huge. And then just the opportunity for you and your family, like you and your dad and brother, to not only see home games but then go experience those games away. That's got to be such a cool childhood memory.
It is, yeah. There are times where I think, should I have been playing more soccer on that Saturday afternoon? But then the places that I got to go, the stadiums, the time I got to spend with my brother and my dad, those times are priceless. They're also, as well, one of my favorite goals is, and I sometimes watch it on YouTube. It's such poor quality, and you're looking at it's a long ball over the top, and it's just the player running through, and then it's basically like a 2-footed sliding on the keeper, and it's a goal. So it's probably more not necessarily the goal. It's more the moment, the game that it represents. And that's the thing that I think has actually helped me with my coaching as well, and I can also appreciate that they're now in the Premier League and they're one of the best teams in the country. Although people will disagree with me, they technically are. So that's been a big thing, seeing how the team has evolved over the years. But it was definitely a big part. Everyone in the town my age most people wanted to be a Burnley player. They would mirror their game on playing that way. So it was definitely an exciting time. Something that I've tried to, or I wish that I could recreate for my own children. We had been to watch the New York Cosmos. They're in so many different leagues, it's hard for me to keep up. But we had been to a few games, and that had it would never compare to Burnley, but it would compare to a reserve game, and that was another thing that I enjoyed as well. You could go. My first ever professional soccer game was a reserve team game, and if you had a season ticket, you could go watch the reserve team for nothing, for free. And they would, back then there was no under 23s, so it would be injured players or players that had been suspended that were coming back into the team, or it would be up and coming youth players. So you would really get to see some good players, and plus there'd only be maybe 500 people there. They'd only open one stand. So now when people say, "Oh, soccer's not the same with no fans," when they're watching it on TV, I watched some good matches where there was one man and his dog.
Yeah.
And you got to actually see some good players, maybe a top level pro that was coming towards the end of the career and was now a backup player, or what we call a bench player for a team. So it was, as well, having that opportunity as well to see those games. And we were able to get a little bit closer. Sometimes you could even hear them. You could hear what they were saying. Maybe it wasn't good for a 12-year-old to hear some of the stuff that came out of the mouth, but it was still, that was I didn't walk into a 50,000 seater stadium and see world-class players. That's not what made me fall in love with the game. My first game was a reserve team game, and it was Burnley played a team called Grimsby Town. And what was even funny, I didn't even know that there was calling it a stadium's kind of a loosely using that word, but going into the stadium, I was amazed. And to see that, the field, the pitch under the lights, that was, to me, that was just spectacular. And again, I was also excited because I was also just able to stay up a little bit later and go with a friend and his dad to watch the game. So that was a big thing. And I still, even when I've gone back home recently, I've also gone to watch Accrington Stanley. My brother lives close to their stadium now, and and it is actually fun to go watch a lower level team with a smaller crowd and just see that. And sometimes I wish that some of my players could see that, because soccer is not always going to be the Premier League with TV cameras and millionaires. It's sometimes a gritty game where players they're fighting for that. There's no rotation in the squad. They're fighting for that place in the team, and if they lose that place in the team, they might not get a contract, or they might not get a new club the next season. So it was definitely an exciting time, one that I look back on fondly, and one that I felt privileged to be able to have.
That's a great point of the fact that you've seen where like Burnley and some of the reserves, like you said, where it's not like you have to put in the work, you have to grind. It's not all flashy like you get to see right now when you, like you said, when it's all top level play. Like there's a ton of divisions within England and in Italy and Spain and all these places that people were coming up. One thing I wanted to talk about, because you brought up the fact that, hey, they're one of the top 18 clubs in England right now. So therefore, like you said, that means they're one of the best. What is the feeling for, because I've always wondered this as a fan, when your teams, I'm not sure where Burnley is in the table right now, but what happens when they're like 10, 11, 12? Do you feel good because they're going to stay like promoted, or do you say, man, I'd rather be top 8? Or what's the expectations like within fans for a team that's not technically like one of your top 4 maybe, or what have you?
I think, and again, I think this is more of an English or a British mentality. Currently, I feel Burnley fans, they're happy that they're in the Premier League. People like myself, I never thought that I would see the day that they would be in the Premier League. So it's still, I still feel that the expectation is low. It is starting to change now because they're that mid-table team, and obviously being mid-table, you typically win and lose. It's like 50-50 of how many you win and lose, or there's a lot of ties, so it can be not the most exciting of game, and you're really only watching the games because you're a fan of that team. You want that team to do well. You're not. It is entertainment, but only as a Burnley fan, only with your Burnley goggles on. So there have been time. It's starting to get to this stage now where fans are feeling like they would like to see more investment in the team. They would like to see the manager backed. It's a case of trying to get a lower level championship player whose contract's about to expire. So can they get him for a reduced fee, or can they buy a player? Kind of similar to like the Moneyball story, that where can they get an extra year or so out of an older pro that may have been released, or can they train up an up and coming prospect and then potentially sell on for a larger fee? So it's, when Burnley did make it into Europe a couple of seasons ago, it was exciting that some fans were able to travel to Turkey and Greece to see the team play, but they weren't necessarily, the team just couldn't sustain it. So there was never really any expectation. They were just happy to see how far they'd got. But now that they're becoming more of an established team, people are now starting to expect a little bit more, which typically does happen to teams. I've seen it happen to teams like Stoke City and West Brom in the past, where you could even put like a West Ham into that category, and even to a degree a Newcastle, like fans are now expecting a little bit more. They're not just happy with being lower mid-table and just showing up each week. They're actually looking for that push, but they do realize that those top 6 teams spend 50, 60, 70 million on a player, and he might not even get 10 goals a season. It's just to be able to break into that thing, everyone kind of feels like they need like an oil tycoon type owner to be able to compete.
Yeah, it's kind of that's kind of the bummer, but one of the beautiful things of the league is that there is such a disparity in some of the numbers in terms of money and like quality of players. And then you got, the ability for Burnley to have an opportunity to play one of those big boys and to get a result, sometimes makes that whole season. But I think, like you pointed out, you all, because of where the club has been before and risen to where it's at, you get more of an appreciation for being there. Like you said, just the fact that each time I look on and go, holy smokes, we're playing in the Premier League, versus when you saw them at, 4th division or, and working their way up, is so cool. Plus, there's so many examples of quality teams like an Aston Villa or whatever, where they drop and then come back up and drop. So if the fact that you can stay for consistent years is a huge plus. But like you said, after you start doing it for a few years, people start saying, well, hey, now let's start moving up the board a little bit, and what have you. But like you said, sometimes takes a little bit of money, and not everybody has that.
Yeah, definitely. It's becoming competitive. In fact, they actually, this past month, they were just taken over by an American group of millionaires. So everyone had their fingers crossed that there was going to be some investment in the squad in the January, which didn't happen. But they did just announce that they're going to professionalize the women's team. So they're making baby steps. We'll see what happens in the summer, but it is it's still an exciting time to be a Burnley fan. I wouldn't change it. There've been way more highs than lows watching the team. When I watch Burnley, I'm watching them as a fan. If I watch them as a coach, then I'll have grayer hair than I have now. So,
so the move to the States, those first couple of years, they did stuff with some MLS camps and what have you. What was that experience like? And like, where in the country did you move about to do those?
Well, it was remarkable, really. So I got the opportunity. There was a poster on the wall outside the library. They were conducting in-person seminar and then group interviews. Went through that. They did like a training day in the local area where they mailed you a game to play, and you would practice that. And then they actually did like a training weekend, and it was the week before my final year finals. So there was a lot of people that I knew that were going to go that said, I can't, I've got that weekend, I need to study with its finals next week. And that was going to determine your whole degree.
Mm-hmm.
But the training I thought was remarkable. And again, there's so many different people. And then you just got information. I was flying to Atlanta, Georgia, and that's all I knew. I didn't know who. So everyone flew out of London. So for me, it was like a 3.5 hour, 3.5 hour commute to London. So everyone stayed in a hotel. You're in Atlanta. I thought I was going to be in that Georgia area. I even had like a travel guide. I'm starting to learn about the area. I'd been even talking to a few people online, trying to find out about people. And then all of a sudden I knew, oh, you're going with that guy, and a 5-hour drive to Central Florida. So and I've talked about this with a lot of people. Some of the stuff that happened as that first year coach, you would not believe, and I don't know if I believe that many young Americans would do it. I think the fact that you couldn't go home, the fact that home was 3,000 miles away, meant that you just had to grin and bear it. So the fact that just getting in a car with someone you didn't know, you'd never met, well, you soon got to know them after 5 hours on the straight road. So I started off doing some camps in Florida, and then I did a brief stint in Connecticut, and then just random. This was the time as well where obviously there were cell phones, but I didn't have a cell phone, and you would stay with different families like week in, week out, and I got a phone call and a handwritten note that saying, I need to make your way to Newark Airport. We're sending you to California. So I then did my first year, did 12 weeks in Southern California, just north of LA in Ventura County, which again was a great experience. I'm still in contact with a number of people that I coached out there with. So I started doing summer camps, and then they did what they called it a player development officer role. But what you would do is you would wear LA Galaxy apparel, like a jersey. It wasn't an official jersey, but it was an LA Galaxy jersey, and you were known as the Galaxy guys. So me and another coach, we had a list of names, and we would just call, we'd use like the family's landline phone, and you would, Coach Jones, Coach Smith, I'm going to be at the field tomorrow. You just had their last name. You didn't even know their first name. You would, could I come to you and help you with your practice? And then you would go down to the field. You'd have your cones and a bag of balls, and you would then join in their sessions. So for that amount of time, you would go around the field asking each coach if you could help them. And then eventually you got to find some familiar teams, and they would then start to become your favorites. You spend a bit more time with them, then you could go to their games. But at the early stage, it was just the Monday to Friday coaching. And then Saturday was optional. Well, when I say optional, you were encouraged to go to games. So you didn't necessarily coach a team, but you would go and observe, and you could make notes. So you just get to see the plays, you talk to the coach. So it was a real exciting time. We'd also do training at the LA Galaxy Stadium, not actually on field, but we would still be like using their facilities. It was then you got to go to games, and sometimes you'd be given roles to promote the team, to promote summer camps. So that was an exciting time. And then from there, even though I loved it, and after that period, I thought, I definitely want to come and do this again next year. I didn't request to go back. I thought there's so much more of the country to see. They always said, you can request to go back somewhere. But I was like, there might be somewhere different. Let me just see. So I didn't make any requests to go back. I have no idea even if they'd want me back, but I didn't make those requests. Yeah. And then I in I come back from sunny California to I'm sharing a 1-bedroom basement apartment in basically on the Long Island Queens border and it's March and the snow on the ground, and we didn't. It was that California lifestyle where you could walk around in soccer clothes all day,
Mm-hmm.
or just a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and people didn't know if you were a rock star, if you're a soccer player, if you're in a movie. They didn't really care what you looked like or who you were. They just thought, oh, this guy's, who's this young guy, young English guy, seems to have the leisure of the day. It, that's kind of a lifestyle out there. So it was a big culture shock from going from being the entertainer soccer camp coach in this like kind of like movie scene of Southern California to being in a suburb of New York was a big eye opener. But then you never know what happens, because now that it's turned into my home, and I've been here ever since, and I don't really see myself moving anytime soon.
So the whole camp type thing, when you one, uh, I think it's really cool that you, like you said, I went to Georgia. That's all I knew. Like I just was like, this is an opportunity. I'm gonna go after it, and we'll just see what happens with it. And then you hop in a car, head to South Florida, um, and what have you. And then it sounds really cool that you've kind of almost hit you've hit the East Coast, you've hit the West Coast. Um, I think the cool thing too is you don't hear much about coaches wanting to help other coaches. And I think it was cool that some of those coaches were like, yeah, sure, come and help us with our teams. Because I know a lot of coaches are very kind of guarded about their teams. Was there some that kind of pushed back on like, dude, I don't need your guys' help? Or
Yes, there was always even at my club now, there's always going to be that guy that pushes back. But then there was always that one guy that was really happy for you to take over and would want you to come back each week, and then you'd be getting a phone call saying, Paul, you can't have favorites. But there were a lot of opportunities, a lot of situations like that where they would be defensive about you wanting you to join in, or they would just say, oh no, I don't need any help. And then you would ask, oh, would you mind if I observed? And then it would be, I always remember one guy, and he was kind of reminded me of like I don't know if you know a former US player called Chris Sullivan. He reminded me, he's like this kind of like, he's like the Zach Morris of soccer. Kind of like a good-looking man with like the flowing blonde locks and the tanned and the athletic looking. And then he just had the kids in a long line, and he was like juggling the ball. And the basic exercise, if I serve the ball underhand to you and you side volley it to me, well, he was doing that, but instead of him catching the ball, he was juggling. So it was just all about him. It was just about him showing off. And these little guys were just trying to like knock the ball back to him. So it was, that's not even, I always remember that. I never knew that man's name. You just learned to, there was also so many teams. You would go from like under 16, and it went down to under 6. While I was there, I only made it to like under 10, because you couldn't get round to everyone. It was a huge field, and you would just walk around. So sometimes there were times where it was you felt a little degraded that maybe you didn't get hold of a coach on the phone, and you would show up and you would just say, no, we don't need help. So there was, but then there were so many people that would open up arms and wanted you to come, and then wanted you to go watch their games. So you just, sometimes you got to realize you can't help everyone. It's and unfortunately, and again, you're only there for a short period of time. It's and even even in today's world, if I'm coaching on the field and then a coach comes along and you're like, oh, I don't know this guy, even though eventually you'll warm up and you'll get along, I feel that you'll somewhat be a little bit defensive. It's like, is he copying what I'm doing? Is he, or like, I hope he doesn't think I'm copying him, or maybe that's just my self-conscious thinking. But there, yeah, you're going to come across people like that throughout your coaching career, and it's again unfortunately, you just had to walk on it and help someone else.
I'm assuming too, as much impact that you made on those coaches and those players and teams, the experience for you, like even watching the guy that's juggling with a long line of kids and you were making mental notes of like, look, man, it's all about you. And I don't think, I'm assuming you don't agree with that. It should have been about the kids at that point. So I'm assuming from those experiences from Florida, seeing stuff in Florida to California to Connecticut, now in New York, all these experiences that you got to see, even if it was just observe a team or watch a game, have been constantly, like you said earlier about being a goalkeeper and observing the game consistently all the time. It seems like that's been was another great opportunity to, I'm assuming, is helping you now as a director of coaching.
It is as well. And then even going back to when I said I'd started the game, which I felt was considered late as that 10-year-old, and all sessions were parent led if you wanted, or volunteer led. So if you wanted that extra coaching, you may have got it from the PE teacher, the gym teacher at school, or you may have been able to attend like a training clinic during like school holiday vacation times. But that's one of the big reasons why I got into coaching as well, because I didn't get those opportunities as a child to get the training I feel like I wish I'd got, or I deserved. So helping those children has been a big part of my role as director of coaching. It's been a big outreach in the community. When I was able to go into schools, that was a big part of the thing. I would run after school clubs, and you get to, whether you were helping kids that had two working parents, or if parents were separated and the boy had just been, say, put in childcare at the school, and you had the opportunity to go and play soccer with them and teach them, or encourage them to then come and join you on the weekend and play for the club. So that's been a big part in helping those kids. And even, you just never know that 5-6-year-old, he might not like it now, but in a few years he may come back. Like I always find that now, I don't know if this happens for you, you get that 12, 13-year-old come, I get a phone call, oh, we're looking to join the team, but they've never played before. And I feel like I'm talking to a 37-year-old pro who's looking for a 5-year contract. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't really have anything I can offer. In some sad way, you think you're dealing with a veteran at 12 years old, because they've never played, and maybe soccer's the teams that you have available, it just wouldn't be a good fit for them. So I've done my best as well to try and accommodate teams for those. I coach throughout the club. I'll start with the young guys and try and build my way up, just so to try and give everyone the opportunity to get at least a glimpse of what a good session is. And I feel that, like I always say, you don't want to leave anyone behind. And I had mentioned this before. I'd spoken to another coach that I want to give everyone a chance. There's so much going. This is what I find out being a DOC as well. There's so much going on in these kids' lives. So whether it's personal issues or physical or psychological things that being a doctor, I have no idea. But sometimes you can just giving them a chance to play soccer. I feel like they all deserve that, and you learn so much being a DOC because you're dealing with registrations as well, and you'll notice, oh, this player's got a hyphen last name, or this player's registered. The name he was registered under is different than the name he goes by on the field. So you start to learn a little bit more about the players, and it's not just like it when I first started. It was show up, run an entertaining soccer session, and then travel to the next town and do the same. Now you're involved with the kids. It's funny that not only do you know the kid and their siblings, and then you know the parents. Then you start to recognize what car they drive. Like I don't. So like you're so involved that you know so much about them, and then you might even maybe you have to drop off a uniform at their house, or you just because you're in town, you then start to see where they live and who they hang out with, and things like that. Or then I see them in the school setting. So actually, obviously there's only so many hours in the day, and I have my own family as well to look after. But you feel that you can get in there very, very deep. And I've been some very exciting stories as a DOC, being an impact on these players, but then there's also been some very sad stories. But then you're so much involved in the players' lives that you don't actually realize it. After all these years, I'm still just realizing that actually do have a big impact on these guys.
I really love the fact that everything that you just talked about as a DOC really resonates from where you were as that 10-year-old who was just starting in, and at that point, quote unquote, wasn't ready to play on like the A team at that point. You had to kind of work your way through. And I think that's awesome because it gives you appreciation that, if I can tap into them when they're younger and get them to at least experience it. So when if they do come back as a 10 or 11-year-old, they've had some experience with it. But like you said, even at 10 or 12, you know what it's like, and you know that it could lead to something. And I think it's awesome that you're like, hey, I want to give you guys opportunities to play. And I, being a DOC in the past, completely agree. You become more than just seeing them as a soccer player. You see them like as their actual name. You're not number whatever 10 on the back of your jersey. You're actually whatever their name is. And you get to see, like you said, what vehicle they're riding in, or who picks them up and who drops them off, and who's consistently at games and all that kind of stuff. So it's so much bigger than just. And the other thing I love about it is it wasn't, as a DOC, you weren't like, well, here we work and this is our tacticals and this is our technical and this is like, no, you could tell yours was about like, we're trying to build kids up, like going to the schools and touching base with kids and stuff like that. I think is really, really awesome.
Yeah, sometimes it's I've sometimes said this as well. I've somewhat felt that my club might have had an identity crisis. I've even had that situation sometimes as a coach, where like I was watching I coached one team, and because of they played in a tournament and it was streamed, you weren't allowed to fit. I wasn't allowed to go in. It was just the parent of the team. So I'm observing on a YouTube stream, and it wasn't the greatest soccer game. It was a lot of if I had $1 for every time the ball went out for a throw in, I'd be a very wealthy man. So, but and there was things. Obviously, I want to help those players become better players, and I know once I can get on the field with them in the spring, that we'll make improvements. But I know that team has so much community about it that the girls have actually become friends. In fact, this is a great story I'd like to share. I had one girl used to run an after-school club, and I wouldn't even get the gym. I'd get the auditorium, So you've got the stage, the band, it's set up for band on the stage, and you're trying to run an after school soccer practice in there. And I had one girl and the rest were boys. And I will admit, she was a little a needy child, but I was, he still cared about it, still gave her the chance, still tried to accommodate. She was the only girl in the session. And then a few years down the road, I get a phone call. This girl's looking for a team. And because of her age, and again, this is a 2008 birthday. So again, you're talking about like a 12-year-old, like a 12-year-old girl that, and it's like she's only really played in the school auditorium, not really played any formal soccer, or the training that she's received is limited. But I was actually able to get her on a team. And even though she is not from that town, in some cases, can't do everything, but she's actually then been involved, and they were able to do they were able to go to a haunted house together at Halloween, like an outdoor event. So she was actually, now she really felt like she was belonging to the team. They were able to do like a karaoke party, and the fact now that I gave that girl a chance, I didn't leave her behind as that only girl in the auditorium. And now the fact that I was able to get her a team, and of course score lines don't matter at this age, but in her first game she scored. Wow. And it was like, I kind of got like goosebumps in a way. One, because I was also happy it was my first game back on the field after the COVID break. So I was like, and it was a beautiful day. So I was happy that I was back on the field, and the fact that girl, it was a miracle that she was able to last the game, because this is a girl as well that's lived a sedentary lifestyle just because of the circumstances in 2020. So I was really, really struggling to finish the game, just as well, being first time playing in 11v11. So it was the fact that I was able to give a child like that a chance. And it's funny, you even get phone calls now from neighboring clubs asking me if we're short a few players. And I was like, well, I'd love to help, but I'm contracted to this club. I can't help. Unfortunately, I can't be necessarily helping every club in the area. Maybe I'm missing an opportunity there, but but yeah, that's been an exciting time. And like you said, there are times where I would like to spend more time on the tactical side, and hopefully later on in my career that I will get that opportunity. But the club are really happy with me, and like what I do for the players, like on and off the field as well. It's a big thing. Like the club's phone number is actually my phone number, so they know that if they call that number, that they're actually getting through to an actual person that can give them information. It's not going to go to an answering machine and get answered 4 or 5 days down the road, or when next time someone's in the clubhouse. So it's it's the position is always evolving. It was never what I initially expected it was going to be, but it's an important position for the club, and it's I do more than make kids run around a field. So, and that's what the club are happy that I do.
I think the word evolving is spot on for just your entire, like what I've heard in this hour chat, of like going from that young kid learning to be a goalkeeper, to the experiences, to going to Burnley games with dad, to the experience of coming over and doing the camps here in the States. To this, is each thing that you've gone has been a little bit different, but you're constantly pulling and learning different ideas and and things. And like you said, even this, at some point, once you get that relationship built and the club to where it is, then maybe you can spend more time on that other side. But I think you recognize that the game is bigger than just what's on the pitch, for you all. Paul, this has been awesome. If people want to follow up, and connect with you, and I know you've got a podcast as well, which I'll put in the notes and what have you, but what's an easy way to get a hold of you and connect and maybe continue this conversation?
Yeah, I'm active on Twitter. So my handle is at Paul Kelshaw. It's also my Instagram handle. They can contact me that way. I'm always open to an email as well. They could always send me an email to Paul Kelshaw at PK Soccer Inc. I'm always happy to, oh, sorry, it's pksoccer.org. So they could always, I obviously get the odd email here and there that I can easily respond, but Twitter definitely the best way, at Paul Kelshaw.
All right, perfect. I'll wrap this thing up. Hey, this is Kieran, Coach's Corner Chats, and I'm out. Peace.